Hello all, I'm Julien Waro from NG Global Markets Economic Research, and I'm delighted to introduce our first EnergyScan webinar session dedicated to key trends that will impact energy prices in 2020. So this exclusive content is dedicated to our premium users and some guests interested in switching to our premium offer. So we'll summarize all premium features of EnergyScan at the end of this presentation. Please note that this live session is the first one of a series of quarterly webinar sessions available only with an EnergyScan premium account. So let's introduce our experts that will deliver their insights today. First, we have Évariste Nouki, which is the head of the Economic Research Department at NG Global Markets. Olivier Gasnier, which is a senior macroeconomist in the Economic Research team. We have Étienne Cauvin, recently joined us as a power and emission analyst, and Laurent Néry, which is the head of oil and gas analysis at NG Global Markets. So they will focus on key topics for macro, FX, oil, natural gas, power, and carbon markets. So note that you will have the possibility to ask questions to our experts through the chat module during the presentation. So we'll select 3 questions that will be answered after each chapter, considering that macro and oil issues will be treated as one part only. So don't worry if your question is not selected, you will have the possibility to contact our experts after the webinar through the EnergyScan chat module available with your premium account. So let's start with some key insights on the macroeconomic environment. So Olivier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Julien. So yes, we will start with the macroeconomic environment. Of course, when we scheduled our this webinar, there was no health crisis in China. I will come back a bit later on that, just before the oil section. But we will, we assume that this crisis can have a strong effect probably on the Chinese growth in the short term, but that it won't really affect the broad pictures for 2020. So let's start with macro, with this trade deal that has boosted optimism at the start of the year between the US and China. Basically, this deal consists in Chinese commitments to buy more US goods to protect intellectual property and to open its market. In front of that, we have essentially commitments by the US authorities to start implementing more tariffs. Actually, there are, in my view, 3 main problems with this trade deal. First, the fact that only a minor part of tariffs implemented since 2008 has been removed, as you can see on the graph on the left. There are more than 300 billion Chinese exports that are still concerned by tariffs. On an average, these tariffs have increased from almost nothing to around 20%. The second point is that the Chinese commitment to buy more US goods are rather unrealistic, as you can see on the graph in the middle. It's very unlikely that China can increase those purchases as it is scheduled in the agreement. And if you read the agreement, you can see that already they have forecasted the possibility that this could be the case, and that there could be a resumption of the tariffs war probably after the next US election. But clearly, I think it's really more a truth than the trade piece. The last thing I would like to underline is the fact that if you even if you believe that indeed China will increase dramatically its purchases of US goods and services, that will mean that the US share of Chinese imports will rebound sharply from around 6 to 11%. And as the size of the cake cannot increase in such a short period of time, it will mean that this deal will make losers on the. I'm thinking about Germany in industry, Brazil for agricultural products, or other Asian countries for tech products. So all in all, this is a deal that has boosted confidence, as we can see on this second slide. But this deal clearly has not solved everything. So let's have a look at evolution of confidence indices. I have taken the manufacturing PMIs here on this on this slide. You can see that the impact has been mainly felt in US and China, which seems rather logical, while the improvement in Europe, for example, remains very limited at this stage. In particular, if you look at new export orders, you can see that there is a clear improvement, for example, in Germany, but that comes from very abnormally low levels, really depressed level on the. So far, the German indices are consistent with the activity contraction. And to this respect, if you look at the last IFO survey that has been released at the start of the week, it showed an unexpected fall in German confidence. So fragile improvement that needs to be confirmed at this stage. Something that I would like to underline as well is the fact that the rebound in optimism we have seen at the start of the year, so of course before this epidemic in China, has been linked to the trade deal, but also to the fact that the monetary policy has been eased again by the main central bank in the second part of last year, and in particular in Q4. What you can see on these graphs is, on the graph on the left, you have this slight rebound in global liquidity. I mean, if we take the three main central banks, the Fed, the ECB, and the BOJ, that has occurred in Q4 2019. Especially, we have seen a restart in quantitative easing from the ECB and a disguised restart of quantitative easing by the Fed. And that has pushed global liquidity higher. And that can explain why we have seen a parallel increase in risky assets. Here you have the main equity indices, and in safe haven assets such as gold, for example, because liquidity is really overabundant and simply, you have absolutely everything on the rise when it is the case. So that means also that this improvement in confidence is quite fragile. It is still tied to over-accommodating monetary policy. So that leads me to talk a bit about the US. We had the recession fears in the US last year, mainly fueled by the fact that the yield curve was at some point inverted. I still think that this is a very reliable indicator, but we have seen the yield curve steepening again at the start of the year, even at the end of last year. And so these recession fears have really disappeared. Once again, I think even if you don't envisage recession, strictly speaking, in the US, I think the probability of a sharp slowdown in the US economy is still quite high for 2020. The growth in the US really relies on consumers, and we have seen that consumer confidence remains very strong. The job market is healthy for the time being, so purchasing power gains are strong as well. But if you look on the corporate side, you have many signs that are warning, in particular the fact that there is a clear decline in profitability of US corporates, except maybe in the tech sector. The fact that corporate debt has reached really incredible high levels, and this is, of course, a source of weakness for the US growth. The fact that the current expansion phase is already the longest in history. If you look at the behavior of business investment in the US, it has contracted already in Q2, Q3, and likely in Q4 last year. So there is a clear problem on the corporate side in the US with a weakening in their financial situation and an increase in financial risk. The second point I would like to underline is the fact that there are an increase in political risks in the US. First, you have still this impeachment procedure concerning Mr. Trump. It's not completely over. There is still a possibility that it remains in the Senate. And the second thing is that markets have more or less forgotten the risk that could be associated with a victory of the left of the Democratic Party at the next presidential election, as you can see on the graphs on the right of this slide. So, of course, this is represented by the candidacy of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. That could be a potential source of disruption if they appear leading the first votes for the Democratic primaries that will start next month. So all in all, we have the global growth forecast that remain unchanged for me, meaning that for 2020, we have more or less the same picture as 2019, no real improvement at the global level. In addition, we can think that the virus will have a negative impact on the Chinese growth this year, even on average. So yes, I'm a bit more skeptical about the evolution of the US economy, and that makes the difference with the IMF, for example. But if you look at the Bloomberg consensus, it is already at 3.1 for this year. So no big change in 2020 compared to 2019 in terms of global GDP growth, and I think an increase in risks, in particular financial risks, with risk of downward correction in US equities in particular, and some political risk also in the US. And so now we have also this risk recently appeared with the spreading of the coronavirus in China. That makes me that makes a transition for the oil part of the presentation. As you can see on the left graph, the virus has triggered a sharp downward correction in Brent prices. They had topped $70 per barrel on US Iran tensions at the start of the year or the months. Now we have prices, Brent prices below $60 per barrel. As you can see on the graph too, this is mainly a driven-led market, in the sense that, yes, the OPEC output cut decided at the end of December has pushed a bit prices higher, but the market has often reacted to a variation in demand rather than supply issues. Only we had a short-term reaction, for example, when there were attacks against Saudi Arabia infrastructure. If we compare the current market reaction to the virus to what happened in 2003 with the SARS, it is pretty similar. We had also a very strong decline in oil prices. And what is interesting is that the lowest point had only been reached 2 months after the start of the crisis. So That means probably we have oil prices at this kind of low level for a moment until there is a clear improvement in the health situation. And that is linked in particular to the fact that there is really a crash in transportation activity during this kind of crisis. And yes, right now you can see that there are many airline companies suspending or reducing sharply their flights towards China, and we will have confirmation of all this with figures that should be released in the coming days or weeks. So now, more specifically on the oil market, just some slides to show that there has been clearly a downward revision in demand in 2019. That was the unpleasant surprise for OPEC, and OPEC was forced to cut output sharply to counter first the rise in non-OPEC supply. You can see that more or less OPEC has reduced production by 2 million barrels per day, and at the end of the day, the global supply was rather stable. So demand was down. As you can see on this graph, the fear for 2020 is that the same kind of scenario repeats itself. That is to say, OPEC struggling to reduce its output, and in front of that, still higher non-OPEC supply and a downward revision in demand forecast. For the time being, the main oil agencies are expecting the demand to increase by 1 to 1.5 million barrels per day. That may be a bit excessive, especially if there is an unexpected hit on Chinese demand due to this sharp fall in transportation activity linked to the virus. Next slide about the increase in non-OPEC supplies, especially that comes from the US. With still the shale oil bringing most of the increase in this US oil output. Okay. So we think that, of course, this increase should continue. The forecast is that the average level of US oil output should be around 13.3 million barrels per day. We are around 13 million barrels per day right now, so that means further increase until the end of the year. Nevertheless, we have some prospect of slowdown in the second part of this year. This is clearly what comes from when you look at the various survey about the sector, and also there are many companies that face financial problems, and of course they will be exacerbated if prices remain at this kind of low level. So maybe I would say some easing in the pressure on OPEC coming from the rise in US output. To sum up all this, we have a final table that may help to understand a bit better the world oil balance for this year. So you can see the evolution of demand, as I told you, between 1 and 1.5 million barrels per day coming from OECD, and especially from non-OECD countries. They really drive demand. On the supply side, still an increase in non-OPEC supply, but as I told you, if we expect some slowdown in the second part of the year, that should come from the US. And that leaves the OPEC with still a strong pressure to keep reducing output this year. You can see that there has been already a sharp decline in 2019, but this was not enough actually to face the rise in the non-OPEC output and the decline in the demand, and the pressure will remain intense. Even if you assume that there is a strict respect of the deal agreed at the end of last year, and that OPEC manages to extend this deal to the end of the year, that would leave the market in oversupplied for the first part of the year, and that will only bring back rebalancing for the second part of this year. I mean, you can see that on the evolution of stocks that would become negative at the end of 2020. So all in all, that means prices should remain under downward pressure on top of course, the impact of the virus for the first part of this year, and that we can only probably envisage a more favorable environment for higher level of oil prices in the second part of this year. So I'm ready to answer any question about this.
Okay, thank you, Olivier. So we are gathering questions from the audience. So I'll give you a few seconds if you have any questions to ask to Olivier on macro and oil issues. Okay, so we'll start with the first question. So Olivier, what about the impact of the Brexit in Europe?
Brexit, it will happen next Friday, 2 days. No big impact. I mean, at the global level, that is one of the source of uncertainty that has been removed at the end of last year. Now, it's essentially a question of the negotiation of trade deal between the UK and Europe. Mr. Johnson has asked the EU to end the negotiation at the end of this year, which seems completely unrealistic, but nevertheless, this is the basis of reasoning, I would say, for the start of these negotiations. I think that as we advance in the course of the year, maybe we could have some negative pressure again on the pound if these negotiations are not going very well. On that, probably what we will see as there are key topics such as the fishing that will probably prevent these negotiations to go smoothly in the course of 2020. So I would say the Brexit deal, the Brexit risk will come back in another form in a way in the course of this year.
Okay, so we have a question from Jürgen. So are natural gas liquids also included in the non-OPEC figures? I think he refers to the world oil balance.
Yes.
Okay, they are included. Thanks. And one last question. What is your price forecast for Brent prices?
So Brent prices, Antoine, who is responsible for oil forecast, is not here right now. So I prefer not to change those forecasts right now. As I told you, basically the scenario is that oil prices can come down again further in the first part of this year due to negative fundamentals, and then rebound in particular in Q3 when demand is stronger. But if you look at levels, we are already much lower than what we had expected at the start of the month, as we expected prices to come back closer to $60 per barrel, but we have fallen below these levels. So keep in mind these, the shape of the curve, if I can say that, for oil prices, down or staying very low in the short term, with more positive prospect for the second part of this year, and it's possible to see prices nearing $70 per barrel.
Okay, so we have one last question from the audience. Can you please ask really quickly? So yield curve inversion is a historically good recession indicator in the next 6 to 18 months. So Olivier, do you agree that the real recession risk is in the second half of 2020?
I would have put it rather more during spring, but I can only see that for the time being, we have absolutely no evidence that it can come very quickly. I think you need a trigger. And the trigger can be, for example, a crash in the equity markets or a sharp increase in the political risk that would be represented for the US equity market by candidacy of Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. This is the kind of events that can trigger really a big change having a big impact on the US equity market and then on the US consumers. Apart from that, expect a slowdown, not really a recession for the time being.
Okay, thanks a lot, Olivier. So we are going to switch to the natural gas part with Laurent. Laurent, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Julien. So the title of this part is the LNG oversupply that affected the world gas markets. So how much and how long? With the first slide, we just take a step back on what happened in 2019. It was a record year for LNG markets. So on the left hand chart, you have the LNG exports in the world. So the growth for 19 compared to 2018 is around 55 BCM. So let's say it's the equivalent of the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. And then when it comes to Europe, it's 45 BCM increase in LNG imports. So it means that European has absorbed nearly 80% of this new supply of LNG. And if we go into the details for where does it come from, this new LNG sources, so the main contributor to the growth is the United States, with several liquefaction projects that's starting up in the US. Then you have Russia with the Yamal project, and the Australian market. Actually, it was some projects that starting up in 18 and that were reaching their plateau in 19. You have then, for the other contributors, it's really limited the volumes. For instance, Egypt, thanks to the new Thor field upstream, they managed to produce again some LNG. And then for really the other countries, it's very, very limited. You can note that some countries have a decline, especially Indonesia. So due to probably a lack of investment in the upstream part of their installation. Regarding the importers of LNG, so Europe has taken the lead, and in Europe, you have the United Kingdom with a very big regasification capacity that took almost 11 BCM more LNG than in 2018, followed by France, Spain, and Italy. So we have imported around 100 BCM of LNG in Europe. It's roughly now 20% of our demand. And if we go to the slide, the second slide, you can see how the other producers and exporters to Europe have reacted to this amount of LNG. So if we look at the Norwegian gas exports, actually they have receded a bit year on year. But the main explanation behind the decrease is heavy maintenance that occurred during the summer. And indeed, we observe probably a bit of commercial optimization from Equinor with the Troll field, which permits has been decreased as well. But let's say that they remained above the 100 BCM threshold. The second big exporters to Europe is obviously Russia with pipe exports and with Gazprom. So in 2019, actually, their exports were stable to Europe. If you look into detail, they've exported much less to Turkey and a bit more to Western Europe. And during this influx of LNG, so in 19, the Russians maintained their absolute level of exports. So one of the big losers is the Algerian pipe exports, and here you see on the bottom left chart the sharp decrease in pipe exports, that has been just very partially mitigated by higher LNG exports. So Algeria is plagued with oil-indexed contracts, which were deeply out of the money for 2019, and the buyers preferred to buy a cheap up-indexed gas, and this implied a big decrease in North African exports, and especially Algeria. And regarding the local production, we are in this trend for several years now because of the Groningen cut. And regarding UK, you have the startup of the Culzean fields, which maintain the production at a flat level, but the main contributor to the decrease was actually the Netherlands production, the Dutch production. I've put some forecasts actually for our forecast for 2020 and 2021. So we can expect that for Norway so far, they expect to maintain their exports. We'll see whether at this stage their summer 20 maintenance program is quite light. So they will have the capability to export more. And we'll see whether the low price environment will put them in a situation where they will decide to produce less. For Algeria, actually, we have still a big spread oil to gas, so we will consider that they will remain at a low level in 2020, maybe in 2021. If you look at the curve, they can manage to re-export towards Europe. For the local production, the decline is quite easy to anticipate because the Dutch government sets the line for the Groningen decrease. And then the big question, and the big question mark, is how the Russian will react. We have two kinds of scenarios. If you look at the Gazprom financial statements, they maintain stable exports to Europe for the 2020 up to 2024. But if you look at the flows in the beginning of the year, actually their export level would rather be 170 this year. So let's say, to sum up, the Norwegian and Algeria reduced, mostly Algeria. Russia resisted, and the local production is in structural decline. But indeed, we had a second factor to manage this oversupply of 45 BCM. It was storage. So if you look at the beginning of November storage level, year on year, we managed to store 12 BCM more into European gas storages. And actually, in many countries, we reached the technical capacity, and some storage player offered extra capacity at the last minute in some countries. So keep in mind that for Europe, our storage capacity was a lever to manage this oversupply of LNG, but we already used once this option, and for the future, obviously, we will be constrained by the technical capacity of storages. And then if you look at the impact on prices on this dynamic, you had the first steady decrease in delivery prices for TTF over the first part of the year. So we were trading above 20 euro per megawatt 1 year ago, and we reached the 10 euro per megawatt around June. Then during Q3, let's say it was bumpy, but around 10 euro per megawatt. We had at the start of Q4 an increase. Obviously, the uncertainties about the renewal of the Russian transit through Ukraine put some pressure on the market, and obviously the seasonal demand effect impacted as well prices. But since the start of December 19, the confidence into the renewal of the deal between transit between Ukraine and Russia, coupled with the mild weather, crashed again the prices. We are trading around 10 euros per megawatt currently in Jan. So just this price on the next slide, you can see that We have another driver in Europe to manage this LNG oversupply. It's our gas forward demand. And these low gas prices has a good positive outcome for the gas forward sector because we observed a very big increase in gas forward demand, especially for Italy and Spain over summer 20, but as well for the northern part of Europe. And you can see that after several years of decline at the beginning of the decade, the gas forward demand rebounded in 14-15. It was probably supported by the introduction of the CO2 tax in the UK. We suffered several low lux availability in France. And we had in 2018 a decrease, and the spike in gas prices probably squeezed a bit of gas on the power mix. And in 2019, we are back to a very high level for gas forward demand in Europe. So if we project into the future now, so it was the part of title of this party. So what do we know for 2020? Actually, the LNG build around the world is not yet over. You have still in 2020 a decent increase in new LNG capacity, especially in the US. You have still Cameron and Freeport liquefaction project that will have to start up with their train 2 and 3. And this will add again extra supply. We expect it around 30 BCM more in 2020. Then between 2021 and 2023, we have much less new capacity because between 2016 and 2018, there was very limited investments and FIDs on LNG projects around the world. And it's a classic boom and bust cycle in this industry. You have a clear slowdown, and we have observed in 2019 some decision of investments in new liquefaction capacity, but they will only be available from 2024 and beyond. So we know that we have, again, for 2020, more LNG to manage in our balances. And if we come to the price outlook, I would say that we can, so we have seen that we have several drivers for the European gas system. In the blue area, it's the coal switching channel. So it means that if the TTF, the red curve, is above this blue channel, the gas is not profitable compared to coal to produce power. If you are in this channel, you can have some profitability. And why do we have a channel? It's because the efficiency of CCGT, so gas-fired power plants compared to coal-fired power plants, are evolving. The beginning of the blue area, the upper bound, is the most efficient gas-fired power plant that will replace the less efficient coal power plant. And at the end, if at the bottom part of the blue channel, you have the worst efficient gas-fired plant that are more profitable to run than the most efficient coal-fired plant. So what we observe that we are already this winter below this level. So from a pure market perspective, you should maximize your gas for power assets. Obviously, you still run some coal, first because you have sometimes must run for obligation for some plants, and second because, especially in winter, the thermal generation do need as well some hours with coal producing. Then you have a second channel, the gray area, and here we are talking about the US LNG competitiveness channel. So we are talking about the US LNG shutting. So for someone who is buying LNG from the US, at which point it's still economical to take that boat. And we created this channel because we know that there is different kind of off-takers and their sensitivity to price is different. So as long as the TTF is above this channel, it means that every US LNG off-takers can make a margin over the short term to take US LNG boats. If you enter into this channel, some people can be challenged and can prefer leaving the boats in the US and not produce it, rather than losing money by taking the boats. Losing money over a short-term rational. And obviously, the gray line is the Henry Hub, which is very low and for all the curve. So the different red arrow are rather pointing towards a bearish sentiment on the part of the forward curve. So typically for summer 20, if we add more LNG into Europe than in summer 19, given the storage level, some can question what can we do because we have a limited storage capacity. So at some point, maybe the market will have to test this level to see when the US LNG or whether they are ready to reduce their production, even though historically we have never broken this support, and the European gas prices have never been, at least over the past 10 years, quite close to the Henry Hub. Then if you move, so we see here some potential of bearishness, keeping in mind that the Henry Hub can decrease as well because the situation is quite oversupplied as well in the US. And if they cannot export the gas, they will have to store it. Going into winter 20, we believe that the situation in storage will be quite similar with the one of winter 19. So the TTF has at least the potential to go lower in the coal to gas switching channel. For Cal 21, there is still downward, but at some point you have to think about the tightening on the LNG market, and to keep in mind that with this low gas prices environment, we have the gas demand that could bounce back because many players can be attracted by these low gas prices, especially in Asia. So the rebalancing and the risk of upside would be rather for winter 21. And the last point is the Henry Hub. Indeed, you have some dynamic as well in the US. You have the local gas production trend that reached new high record in 2019. But over the past weeks, we have observed some weakness in the level of production. And if Henry Hub price goes down, you can trigger more coal to gas switch, and that would create demand. And the other driver and risk for the Henry Hub is the way that the US shell players can produce in a profitable manner. I think I'm done for my part. If you have any questions, do not hesitate.
Okay, thank you, Laurent. So here we have several questions for you. We'll start with the first one. So how much more switch from coal lignite to gas do you see in 2020?
So it's a very good question. First, we will have more switch because last year in Q1 the gas prices were much higher and we were not switching that much. So far in Jan we have a huge amount of gas for power production. If you go to summer 20, you can expect the same level. But for the power sector, and we will discuss afterwards, you have the question of the renewables penetration and the risk of the weather risk. If we have a very windy and wet summer, for instance, hydro production will be better and wind production will be better. But we expect indeed that there will be a massive coal to gas switch in 2020, and for Q4 20, we expect that the market can be can accept to burn more gas, and there is downside on gas prices compared to coal for this part.
Okay, thank you, Laurent. Second question. So after the Norwegian production defroze from summer 19 into summer 20, do you expect the possibility of further defroze into 2021, given that they have presumably lower short-run marginal costs than Russian gas and US LNG?
So for the first part of the question, I think yes, they can optimize again, especially because of the contango of the curve between summer 20 and summer 21. So they will have the incentive to do so. The big question is how much they can differ, and we'll have to be very to monitor very closely the financial communication of Equinor. Our point is to say, historically, we have observed up to 4 BCM of commercial optimization. And the question will be, can they do more than 4 BCM if really the price goes much lower than? For the second part of the question, if you think about the short-run marginal costs, I think that Russia can be well positioned because as they already bought their transportation capacity to European hubs, their short-run marginal cost can be one of the lowest of the market.
Okay, thanks, Laurent. One last question, please, quick answer before we switch to the power part. So will we see planned LNG FIDs delayed due to depressed price curve, leading to longer hiatus period?
Yes, I think that some players already delayed their decision, and they will wait for better market conditions to take FIDs. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Laurent. So it's time to go back to the presentation. So Etienne, the floor is yours for power and carbon markets first.
Thank you, Julien. Good morning, everyone. Let's finish this presentation by talking about the perspectives for the power market. And let's start with the benchmark market in Europe, Germany. So the total Germany power production amounted to 513 terawatt-hours in 2019, down by almost 30 terawatt-hours compared to 2018, a decrease mostly induced by a mild winter, reducing the power demand for heating, despite Germany being less thermosensitive than France, and a reduced coal and lignite, which is also called brown coal, capacity this year. Lignite and coal-based power production dropped respectively by 22% and 23% due to weaker demand, strong renewable output, especially wind at the end of the year, and of course fading coal to gas switch prices favoring the gas-fired power plants, which were more competitive. As for the German energy mix, last year lignite and coal accounted for 29%. That is 9 points below the previous year, while wind production rose to 25% from 21% in 2018, as a result of several wind surges occurring at the end of the year. The renewable energy share in the energy mix has increased almost linearly over the last 9 years and reached 38% in 2019. This rise represents a bearish factor for power prices, as the marginal cost is zero, and they should pressure thermal power plants prices. We can expect this phenomenon to increase similarly over the upcoming years, with additional 3 gigawatts of installed wind capacity expected for 2020, reaching 62.8 gigawatts of installed capacity, and further increased by 4.3 gigawatts by 2021, and additional 4.5 by 2022. On the thermal power plant side, I'm sure you've all heard of the German coal phase-out, which aimed to close all of coal capacity by 2038. However, the impact of this legislation should remain limited in 2020, as the first closure of the coal power plants is estimated to occur only at the end of 2020. Germany will even commission a new efficient coal power plant in the coming months, called Dalton 4, adding 1 gigawatt capacity to an already over-designed electric system. The linear phase-out plan, which is part of the coal phase-out plan, will also have a very limited impact, with only 1.2 gigawatts removed by December 21. And on top of that, Germany also intends to stop any nuclear generation by 2022. And to that extent, they recently closed the Philipsburg nuclear power plant in last December. However, the next closure is planned from December 2021. So all this closure of thermal power plants could be interpreted as a possible risk to tense the electric system. However, as we presented before, the increased capacity of wind on one part, but also in gas capacity in the country should offset any risk. So overall, the Germany energy complex is sending more of a bearish signals for power prices in 2020. So now let's go to France, close neighbor. Okay, so French power production dropped last year also at 535 terawatt hours due to the mild weather at the end of the year, reducing the power demand. As you all know, the power demand in France is very thermosensitive. Another reason for this lower generation was the nuclear availability, accounting for only 71% of the French production in 2019, 1 point below the previous year. Actually, the nuclear production has presented historically low levels since last August, as you can see on the upper right graph. It was affected by numerous extension of outages, planned and unplanned, an earthquake forcing the shutdown of 3 reactors for 1 month, but also several long-lasting statutory outages being carried out at the same time, and recently the worker strikes action to protest the pension reform. So this potential support to power prices, as it should tense the electric system, was however offset by the low demand induced by the absence of significant coal spells and strong hydro and wind productions, preventing any significant gains in local power prices. But what can we expect for the upcoming years? Well, first, we can see on the graphs on the right that most of the peak power demand was supplied by the gas-fired power plants. The coal-based power production being less competitive due to the falling coal-to-gas switch price and social movements affecting the availability of the power plants. Considering the current level of power prices and falling coal-to-gas switch, we can expect this trend to continue in the upcoming weeks, pushing power prices further down as gas prices are fading and limiting the carbon allowances demand, but I will talk further about that in the next slide. The nuclear reactor sector should give some support to prices, as the availability is currently 4 gigawatts on average below January 2019 level. EDF is frequently announcing expansions of outages. The strike continues to limit the production on a daily basis, and the 10-year extension should keep limiting the availability as it did for 2019 for the next 3 to 4 years. On top of that, the closure of the Fessenheim power plant in the next months might bring another slight support to prices, which with 1.8 gigawatts of nuclear capacity removed by June. But on the bearish side, the strike impact should not last well, at least we hope so. The potential tension in the energy complex brought by the closure of the French coal power plants is not expected to occur before April 2021, with the first dismantling of the power plant of Le Havre, while the closure of the biggest and last coal power plants, Cordemais, is currently postponed, possibly to 2026. And finally, and this is the main driver of setting the risk and the potential support to power prices, currently the French hydraulic reserves are at a 5-year high, at 69% from the latest number, which offsets any low nuclear availability or future potentially low availability. Okay, so now let's talk about the main driver for power prices, which is the EU ETS, that is to say carbon prices. So short historic, after reaching almost 30 euros per ton in last July, EU prices faded, pressured by the falling fuel prices. They are now trading around 24, 25 euro per ton after a relative gain at the end of the year caused by a break in auction. This short bullish movement was, however, quickly offset by the Russia-Ukraine transit deal, removing the gas shortage risks for 2020 and therefore assuring gas competitiveness over coal, meaning less carbon demand. As you can see on the left graph, EUA prices are currently above the average coal-to-gas switch price, which should limit the compliance demand, as gas is less emitting than coal. However, as you can see on the right graph, this theory has its limit, as the total gas capacity is for now not able to completely replace the coal production during cold spells. This lack of capacity could limit the losses of carbon pricing during cold periods, if they ever happen this year. But most importantly, what about the primary market, which will drive the carbon market over the upcoming months? Well, we'll estimate the total EUA auction volume for the upcoming year to amount to 768 million allowances, including volume from the Innovation Fund and the UK auction. That is 179 million up from 2019, which is a lot and really oversupply risk. This is our estimation based on the market stability reserve application, so the cut in auction volume from last year. But volumes from September to December 2020, as you can see in light blue in the graph, could be still adjusted once the total number of allowances will be published in half May. So the Innovation Fund volumes, which is almost 0.4 million allowances in issue common auction, are currently postponed due to necessary practical arrangements according to EEX. But they should come in the upcoming months and therefore reinforce the supply of the auction, EU carbon auctions. But now let's talk about what we are all waiting for, which is the Brexit implication. So the Brexit deal, which is voted actually by the Parliament today, days from the Brexit deadline, if this deal is accepted, the so far retained 2019 and 2020 auction volumes, that is 2 years worth of allowances, which we estimate to 126 million, should come to the market, which is a huge risk to oversupply it. The auction planning, however, is still not known, but should be unveiled once the Brexit deal, if the Brexit deal is adopted by the Parliament. Whatever they decide on the trading of the auction over 2020, this is a bearish news for the carbon market. And now about the German coal phase-out implication, and especially the EUA cancellation related to it. The latest draft of the legislation suggests that Germany would cancel the EUA surplus created by closing their coal power plants after the application of the MSR at the year, and subject to expert studies. However, it does not provide detailed numbers or cancellation methodology, leaving uncertainties on the subject. Okay, so we can analyze the recent price of EUA contracts. So as you can see, for the last month, power prices have tracked the falling gas prices and are now evolving below clean coal prices, which give an economic advantage to gas-fired power plants, and therefore a bearish driver for the carbon market and hence the power market. But as you can see on the right graph, the technical level of prices are low, which might induce some relative rebounds in the next weeks. Now, about on the more regulatory side, the French government recently unveiled a new proposal about the selling mechanisms of EDF's nuclear production, which is called the ARENH. So in this new proposition, most of the annual nuclear output would be open to competition, EDF included, because it's a part of the government plan to divide EDF activities, that is to say, on one side the production activities and on the other the retailing activities. So most of the nuclear output would be sold to competition instead of the current 100 TWh. About the price, instead of 42 euros per megawatt hours fixed price, there would be a price cap and floor separated by 6 euros. The government is still carrying studies on this proposal while negotiating it with the European Commission, but would like to implement this system by 2022, and at the latest at the end of 2025, when the ARENH mechanism expires. So to conclude about our outlook for power prices for the next months, so what we should remember as bearish factors is of course the bearish outlook for gas, which will continue to drive downward power prices for the upcoming months, and also the real risk of oversupply carbon market induced by the UK auction volume and the innovation fund volumes soon to come to market. However, certain uncertainties remain for this summer, which we have a possible summer heat wave which could limit nuclear availability as it did last year. We could see stronger than expected application of the market stability reserve for the September-December 2020 period, which could support carbon prices. And as we said before, the coal to gas switching theory that it should favorize gas production could be limited by the remaining gas capacity. So overall, we have a current medium-term outlook bearish for power prices, but some uncertainties remain for the end of the year. Okay, so I'm now ready to answer any question.
Okay, thank you, Etienne. So, one question for you. So, how do you link the end of gas shortage risk? The transit control signed between Ukraine and Russia to the fall in CO2 prices.
Okay, so if there was a gas shortage due to this lack of a deal, which has not disappeared, that would improve the production from coal, which is a more emitting production means, and induce an increase in carbon demand, which should normally induce an increase in prices.
Okay, so we have another question. Why are German coal power plants still producing despite the negative clean dark spread?
Okay, so most of coal power plants, and especially German, are out of the money, but they still are producing. So there can be several reasons to explain this. It could be due to heating needs and the use of combined heat and power plants. It could also be to burn coal stock surplus, as most of coal power plants, coal stock surplus bought before, as most of coal power plants are planned to be shut down, or simply already aged volumes. And finally, it could be for technical reasons regarding the power network, like dispatch issues.
Okay, so one last question, very quick answer, please, Etienne. So what will be the consequences of French gas prices falling to 42 euros per megawatt-hour, which is the current level of the ARENH mechanism?
Well, if power prices continue to fall almost linearly as they did for the past weeks, they could meet a strong support at the 42 euros per megawatt, at all the 100 TWh volume dedicated to the ARENH. All consumer using this volume could turn to the secondary market, therefore increasing the demand for power and increasing prices, at least preventing any further loss.
Okay, so that's all for the presentation. Thanks a lot for your attention. Please note that slides and the recording of the presentation will be available as soon as possible in the Energica platform for premium users only. The next webinar session is planned for April. And just before we end today's webinar, we would like to get a very short live feedback. So a quick survey will be displayed on the screen in a few seconds. So please, if you can fill it, just take 30 seconds to fill it. That will be very useful for us. Thanks a lot. So I give you a few seconds. Yeah, I see. Start to answer. Thanks to everybody who takes the time to fill it. So as you are filling the survey, just one last thing for our guests interested in signing up for a premium account. So we're gonna show all the differences between free and premium accounts in this slide. I'll just give you a few seconds to fill. Okay, thanks for those who took the time to answer to the survey. Yeah, just to conclude the presentation, just note that our premium account for 5,000 euros per user per year will give you the possibility to access all market data, reports, including webinars in EnergyScan. You will also have the possibility to receive intraday alerts by email if we notice something that can move markets significantly. You will also have the possibility to chat directly with our experts. So if you have any additional question following this webinar session, so don't hesitate to contact us at energyscan.gem@ng.com. If you want to upgrade, and we'll come back to you as soon as possible with the onboarding process. So now it's time for me to close this webinar session. Thanks a lot again for your participation, and we hope to see you in EnergyScan soon. Goodbye.